I see almost zero likelihood that the majority is going to actively embrace this anytime soon. But nonetheless, because of the geological imperative of this, something or other will happen, whether people like it or not.
We are almost absolutely, totally dependent on oil for all of our activities. First of all, industry, of course, runs on oil. Everyone understands that. Agriculture, modern mechanized agriculture to feed the world, is heavily dependent on oil. If you look at transportation, again, it's obvious, cars and planes run on oil, petroleum, gasoline. And of course, military capability. You cannot fight a war, as the Americans know, without oil. So every aspect of human existence is dependent on oil. And when we reach that point, when we get to maximum production, maximum supply capacity relative to demand, that is a very significant point, which many people think, including me, is without precedent in human history.
Global oil production will peak. The global economy will be devastated by it. We'll see oil wars. Everything will change as a consequence, and yet people won't be talking about the oil peak. They'll be talking about the unemployment figures. They'll be talking about the high price of food. They'll be talking about the fact that you can't get on an airliner and travel anymore because all of the airline industry has collapsed. There are only a few carriers still in business, and the tickets are astronomically expensive. They'll be talking about the latest war or terrorist incident, and they will have completely lost sight of the one event that caused all of those effects.
I think the evidence for peak oil is absolutely overwhelming. First of all, we're discovering less and less new oil fields. Virtually 4/5 of the oil that we're now consuming comes from fields discovered before 1970. The opportunity to find new oil becomes limited to smaller and smaller pockets, which are more difficult to extract and more costly. We are now consuming each year 3 times more than the extra oil that we're discovering. And that gap is widening. But the key point is, I think, really this. At the moment, the world is using about 84 million barrels a day. Opinion in the oil industry is that we could perhaps, at an absolute limit, push that to around 95 million barrels a day. I don't think you'll find anyone in the oil industry itself, let alone outside it, who thinks we could do better than that.
There's something like 53 countries now are physically producing less today than they have at some point in the historical past. I mean, that's fact. That's not interpretation or anything. Of course, you could, if it's just reached peak, you may say that's an anomaly. It may be able to do a little bit better next year, but by and large, most countries are either past peak or going over it. Britain, for example, peaked in 1999. Norway has also now gone over the top, as the Norwegian government confirms, and it's falling fast, about 6% a year. So that means the world is pretty much close to peak of ordinary conventional oil. Then there's another surge of this deep water oil, the last frontier, so to speak. There's a little surge of that coming in probably. And then, of course, there's the heavy oils of Canada and Venezuela that come in. There's a huge resource. There's no shortage of it. But the extraction rate is extremely slow and expensive. So if you put the whole thing together, I think we have a peak around 210.
I think the general consensus, probably within the oil industry itself, although they're very unwilling to say this publicly, but the academic researchers, who are much more likely to be independent and hard-headed in their analysis outside the oil industry, believe that peak oil probably in the area of a 2010, 2015, something like that. And after that, we begin to see a gradual, very slow, gradual reduction in the supply, but an acceleration of demand.